Whoops, forgot to unmute myself there. Almost made the same mistake as the last stream. We are now live. Hello guys, how's everyone doing? We've got 27 viewers so far and it should be building pretty quickly, and today we're going to be talking about something that I've talked about. Actually, I'm going to move my mic a little bit. Hopefully it won't disconnect. Okay. I'm going to be talking about something that I've talked about in the past on this channel, but not under the RM show title, whatever that really means, and that is the ultimate waste of time that game is, and what I suppose I'd call anti-PUA tactics. And by anti-PUA tactics, I don't mean the sorts of tactics that perhaps a woman might use in order to, you know, stand up to a PUA or whatever that means, right? Such would be kind of pointless for this channel, but the sort of behaviours that you should do instead of using game, right? Okay. What I'm really saying in that regard is that actually I should probably explain what game really ultimately is in order to get an idea of what anti-PUA tactics would be. Because the crux of all game, be it metagame, say plate spinning, or through just more direct game tactics, negging, right? This is in regards to, you know, attracting women. That's the general aim of game, right? The entire basis that underlies all game is this mimicking of virtue. You know, when you read some of these PUA books, so for example, say The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi, and I haven't read this for quite a while, one of the things that you will immediately notice is this fixation on not being a chump. This fixation on, well, if you don't do this, they essentially create a false dichotomy where they say, well, if you don't act in this particular way, you'll end up with somebody who's been with 100 guys beforehand, and you will be poorer for it. And they will suggest their alternative in the form of PUA tactics or through game, right? And this essentially comes down to mimicking virtue, or some form of virtue, maybe not Christian virtue in itself, but, you know, mimicking power. That is the entire basis of game on a fundamental level. So, for example, plate spinning, right? The idea behind plate spinning, for those who don't know, is where you keep multiple women on the go, which makes you more confident, which therefore makes you more confident in approaching other women, which, you see, it builds up, right? The confidence builds up a circle of women that you are using for unchaste means. Now, this is just one example, right? And there's plenty of forms of game that end up in a monogamous relationship, right? The plate spinning one is something that I find particularly unpleasant, but I think it largely extends to game books in general. Of course, Rouge V got rid of his. It's all about the mimicking of virtue. And one of the effects of this mimicking of virtue is that you gain a worldly achievement that, first of all, you haven't really earned, and second of all, is damaging in itself. So, let me give you an example, right? Like, you will see online these sorts of pickup artist types, and guys who have been with a lot of women, and they will tend to have this undeserved arrogance to them. For example, one of them I've seen suggest was smarter than Aristotle and Aquinas because they had access to the internet. Now, of course, this doesn't follow, but it proves my point. There is an undeserved arrogance that comes from mimicking virtue and reaping what is a very carnal reward, unquote, for it. But the trouble is that the reward in itself is actually the punishment. This is the thing that I think is very hard for people who are interested in the PUA stuff and, you know, being with women to really grasp. Getting a woman in that situation is not a reward. It's actually a curse. It it destroys your ability to make decisions, right? That when Aquinas and St. Augustine are talking about lust dulling the intellect, they're not joking. And by this, I don't necessarily mean it drops your IQ, but not far off. But we should probably determine what we mean by intelligence first. So intelligence is the ability to observe a situation and make the correct decision. If your brain is full of coom, right, you're not going to be able to make decisions as effectively, because as we all know, that particular faculty is very powerful and can override good thinking. We see this all the time. And this is what Aquinas and St. Augustine are largely talking about. It overrides our ability to do the right thing, because we can't, subordinate our sexual appetite. And by indulging it through, frankly, mimicking virtue, is enough to destroy a man. Because if you can't make the correct decisions in life, then you're going to be in a real pickle. Particularly as with women, right? If you, say, play this kind of trick with a woman who you're very close to, she can cause you very, very serious damage. Likewise, you're also going to be distracted from work that could be otherwise building you up. If you're continually trying to balance, say with the plate spinning thing, if you're balancing 5 women at once for no reason beyond carnal, stupid reasons, then you're not going to be applying as much of your time to things that actually matter. When you're 70, how many of these women are you actually going to know? This isn't long-term feasible. It also completely destroys a man's ability to bond, right? Like, you'll hear these people in the manosphere continually go on about, oh, women are destroyed by the sexual act. And that's true. It destroys a woman's ability to bond. It reduces happiness in marriage. This much is obvious from the studies. But what they won't say, often, is that it does the same to men. In fact, I seem to recall that men are hurt even more long-term by breakups than women. So, it's a problem for both men and women. It's not sustainable, and it mimics something that's good. Confidence that is created through PUA tactics like negging, and through, plate spinning, and through various turns of phrase and various means of speaking to women, like treating them like a child, right? These things all mimic confidence and mimic virtue, but they aren't, and that's the problem. One of the biggest examples of how PUAs are very often not quite as virtuous as their confidence would portray is how, when you confront them about this particular fact, that they're taking advantage of women through psychological tricks, they will say, well, she's already been with 50 other guys, right? What does it matter? Which is essentially saying, well, all the other guys are doing it, right? Is this not an effeminate thing to do? Is it not effeminate to not do the thing you know that you're supposed to do, and instead just follow the pack? Isn't that an effeminate thing to do? Like, this whole PUA thing and the adjacent people, they're all ultimately feeding off of a carnal culture, and they're taking that culture's directives and following them mindlessly. And a lot of this is because they're enslaved to their own lust, but they don't know it. But a lot of it is also peer pressure. We'll answer questions in the chat after I've gone through this particular blurb I've written down. I can already see a bunch of questions from guys. But we'll cover the anti-PUA tactics now very briefly, because there are some good questions here. If you've got a question, tag me in the chat, the YouTube chat, and I will answer it. So, anti-PUA tactics. How do you get away from mimicking virtue for the sake of acquiring carnality, right? Well, the answer to this is to develop actual virtue. And this includes chastity. So this includes quitting pornography. This includes stopping sins against the sixth commandment specifically, right? A lot of people will look at the Ten Commandments and they'll say, oh, they're fairly obvious. And it's like, yes, they are fairly obvious because they are natural law. You stop doing any of that kind of sexual behavior, you stop even entertaining the thought of it, and you keep fighting against that. And that will build up chastity, which is a virtue, which will also increase your ability to work. It will increase your ability to do other things that are painful. For example, going to the gym and smashing out like a really heavy set. Because if you can take the pain of resisting your own desire to coom, then you can resist many other things as well. Also, fasting. This is something that will build up your ability to, control the way you eat and will make you physically better. But the important thing that one must remember when it comes to acquiring the virtues is that, and this is a mistake I've made, they aren't goods in themselves. They ultimately serve a final purpose, and that purpose is Jesus Christ. The whole reason for virtue is to please God and to acquire the beatific vision. And this actually sheds a completely different light on virtue, because I'm sure that many of the more PUA adjacent people will think of, strength, masculine strength, confidence as the virtues. And those are virtues. But there's also faith, hope, and charity. There's trusting in the God that sustains you. There is charity, which means that you love every other person. And there is hope, which is hope in heaven. And I actually want to specifically talk about two of these things. I'll talk about the more controversial thing first. First thing you've got to do. Best anti-PUA tactic ever. Love every single woman you meet. Love every single one. No exceptions. Doesn't matter if she's ugly. Doesn't matter if she's a harlot. Doesn't matter if she is, hobbling on one leg. Love all of them. And what do I mean by love? Of course, you can't feel a sensual kind of love for all of them. You can't find them all attractive. You will them their good and you act in accordance with that. If a girl is unhappy because she's lonely, you comfort her. If she's having trouble with a relationship, then help her with it. If she's having, issues with whatever, help her out with that. And you don't do it for the sake of coom. That would be effeminate. That would be pathetic. You do it because it's good in itself. As virtue is, because virtue is the pursuit of the good. And those things I've just described there, regardless of, what's in it for me, they're good things. In fact, the mere fact that they are good is what's in it for you. The development of virtue. The second thing to realise, and this is something that many PUA types will admit with their mouths, but I don't think they actually think, because they go on about it constantly. And that is that no woman can fill the hole in your life that has to be filled by God. You can bounce between women in different relationships. You can ride the relationship eros high, and then when you've got to the end of that, drop them and move on to the next one. And you will be ultimately living an unsatisfying life with very few children or children between different women, which will make your elderly years very difficult. Or you can accept God, you can pursue the virtues that I have said in accordance with that, and be actually satisfied, and even better, you will get a good woman at the end of that. Because frankly, all of this mimicking of virtue, particularly the confidence and arrogance thing, that attracts the kind of woman that is desperate. And you don't want a woman that is desperate. You want someone you can rely on. In fact, let's describe the best woman possible. Let me find it very quickly. It is from Proverbs chapter 31. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, at least some of you. A good wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her. Can you trust in the girls you attract with game? And he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax, and works them with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night, and provides food for her household, and tasks for her maidens. By maidens she means, house servants. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She girds her loins with strength, and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. That means that she's spiritually powerful. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor, and reaches out her hands to the needy. She needs to be someone who's charitable. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all of her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes herself coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates. That is, her husband is wise, which is what I'm telling you guys to try and be. When he sits among the elders of the land, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers girdles to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Now, of course, these things are not going to be always found in the same woman. Human beings are imperfect, and so are you, and so are women. But if you seek goodness, then God will provide you with a woman that is good. It's as simple as that. So, as a general recommendation for replacing game with something that actually produces virtue, I'm going to recommend very strongly that you read the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. That is from the Catholic Bible. And you read them with a commentary if possible. Haydock is very good. So is Jerome, actually, on this particular topic. And when you're done with that, you read the Gospels. And the very first book of the very first book of the Solomonic wisdom, right? Aside from the Psalms, the Psalms is another book in the wisdom literature which you should read and probably chant as well. Proverbs will provide you more wisdom than the entirety of the PUA community ever will on its own, and it's 30 chapters. Just meditate on it and take it seriously, and you'll get the fruits of it. And that is how, if you want a good woman, because if you were a PUA, that's what you're interested in. You're interested in being with a woman on some level. If you want a good woman, a woman who is kind, if you want a woman who will take care of your children and will be an actual life partner, and not just some, girl who is looking for some fun for a weekend, which is something that you should be avoiding, because it destroys both of you, then follow that. Okay, so I've done my blurb. Let's have a look at the questions. Okay. Plate spinning is a dumb term, but the concept is good. No, Thomas. The concept is awful, because you're not only wasting the girl's time, you're wasting yours as well, and all just to darken your own intellect. It's the same with women. I got a handsome man, well done, dear, but did you keep him? Yeah, if it's the same with women, then they're just wasting their time as well. It's the same with those sorts of women who maintain beta orbiters. They're just doing it for the sake of their own ego, and they're wasting everybody's time. If you sense a woman who's trying to make you an orbiter, run. What's the point? Why would you waste your time with a girl who is only interested in your attention, not actually interested in you? Just be alone, if it's that big of a problem. If one with a dysgenic physiognomy, how does he ignore the fact that he will be inflicting his appearance on the woman he's supposed to love? Well, as I say love, I say willing the good. I'm not saying engage in a relationship like a marriage. I'm saying love them all because you want to help them, because that's what Christ told you to do. But also because it's just innately good in itself. If you aren't having intercourse with her, you are her girlfriend. Well, No, many people stay chaste before marriage, and that's actually how you should do it, so no, that's not how it works. This is not germane to the subject matter, but I joined one of the riot rooms and was surprised at the want of the discussion about philosophy. You probably didn't find the philosophy chat. Felix, the modernist, asked the main problem. Where do you find virtuous women? All the people speak about being bold enough to ask her out, but for that you'd have to find someone who you want to ask out. Well, you don't even have to ask them out if they're really someone you want to be with. You'll just spend time with them naturally. You don't have to make some big proposal necessarily. You'll just drift together naturally. And if you can't find one, well, first of all, you're never going to force the process, right? This is one of the problems with game, right? I've written down here that the reward is the punishment. And it's because game assumes that you can take control of these things in your own hand and do whatever, right? Because I used it and it was incredibly effective. But it didn't get me what I wanted. It didn't get me, a virtuous woman that I could be in a relationship with. It got me attention from women I frankly didn't want to be with. Or I thought I wanted to be with them initially and then it became very clear that they were not what I thought. And it's because of the sort of signals that you're throwing out when you engage in game. It makes you seem like a much easier guy than you actually are. So don't do that. In terms of like finding women or rushing at it, don't worry about it. Seriously, if God wants you to be married, he will produce a wife. You will meet her. You just have to be patient. Don't force it, because if you try and force it, if you try and take control of what is God's gift to you ultimately, then you'll just end up unhappy. Because you'll be usurping control over a situation that you don't rightfully have. This is why you have all of these guys who, for whatever reason, they call them players, right? And they've got all of the bling and all of that, and they're all up in the culture and stuff, but they're in reality incredibly miserable. Because they're trying to force the bond. They're going out there, they're playing around with girlies, they're doing stupid things. And they're not going to get satisfaction from that. And it's the same with guys who are seeking, girls in an aggressive way the same way. You know the situations that you'll need to be in to meet women. You know what you like doing or what you need to do. So just do that and eventually it'll happen if it's meant for you. Watch Rollo Tomasi and read his blog. I've read the Rational Male Volume 1 and part of 2. 2 kind of bored me because it was all about like the age and the wall kind of thing, I seem to remember. And I've watched a few interviews with him. And yeah, no, not my thing. You need to be good looking enough to get a woman to begin with. No, you don't. No, you don't. Like, look at Joe Pesci, right? 5'4". He made up for it in other ways, so can you. Like, coping because you're ugly is an excuse. Like, you might be like me. I'm 6'1" and I've got a baby face. And you know what I did? I built up confidence, and it didn't matter. I'll defend plate spinning. It is a way for guys who aren't used to having a GF gain confidence. It's not a permanent solution, but it's a way for maybe shy and awkward guys to be really confident with women. Well, you know what's a better way that doesn't involve emotionally manipulating women? Being successful in other things. Like you'll notice, guys who are really successful at a particular skill, where they're like at a really high class, they build up confidence in other areas as well. Lucius Valentina says, late to the stream, wishing all of you a good and prayerful feast of St. Clement I. St. Clement, pray for us. Yeah, I'm sorry my dog is lazy, but the whole you're ugly excuse is just cope. There's plenty of ugly men who are with very attractive women. And I know that you mean physically attractive by that as well, which is an even worse way of approaching it. Because to be physically unattractive doesn't mean that you're unattractive. It just means that you're not nice to look at. like guys will say, "Oh, that's cope," or women will say, "Oh, that's cope," but it really is. It really is the truth, because there was this girl that I knew who was not very attractive, but she was like exceptionally like feminine, and she was so attractive on account of that. And if it can work for a guy, then imagine how it can work for a woman who themselves aren't quite so focused on physical attractiveness. You can't compare Joe Pesci to the average Joe. The 80-20 rule still applies here. The 80-20 rule is a meme. Like, sure, there are guys who are more attractive than others, right? I've known that from experience as well. But what you do is you simply make yourself more attractive in other ways. Like I said, Joe Pesci, not an especially attractive guy. What is he, like 5'3"? Chad, though. Just become a Chad. I mean, I know that it's kind of like a meme to say, like, go in the shower, bro, just have a shower. But really, having your life together, having a good job, having prospects, being in physically good shape, developing your confidence, which you will get from developing your craft or skill. This will make up for the fact that you're a 2.5 or whatever. I know that the 80-20 rule has scientific evidence, but that doesn't mean that you're bound by it. Why wouldn't you just choose to be in the 20%? Seriously. Just choose. Like, it's going to take a lot of work, but most people don't work on anything. Most people are like extraordinarily lazy. If you are interested in being in the 20% and you're willing to work at it and develop the virtue of that, then you can do it. And there'll be all of these like PUA guys or whatever saying, oh, like, you're just giving them false hope, you're lying to them. No, I'm not. I'm telling you, if you work at something for 12 hours a day, be it your job as an electrician or whatever, right? Or, I don't know, you're in a graduate degree in some science, or, you're, I don't know, maybe you put like a lot of time into your charity work, right? And you become good at it, then you'll develop confidence and it won't matter. I don't care what Pareto says. Just like the rule. You know the things that differentiate the Chads from everyone else. Just like follow what the Chads do. It's not like it's genetically like inscribed on their DNA completely. Yet true players are not con artists or liars. They are eligible bachelors with social awareness and understand jealousy is kryptonite for women. You don't need to play with the woman's emotions. You will never be happy if you do that. Because it will end up reflecting on you because your conscience will tell you that you're doing something wrong. You don't need that. You can spin plates all you like. You can have like attention from like 5, 6, 7, 8 women at once, right? It won't make you happy. Adam, Andrew, sorry, I have already covered this. Yeah, the Chad meme is just cope for losers, right? If you want to be a Chad, or whatever that means, you know what you need to do? You need to get up early, pray for an hour or so, go to the gym with a good program, specifically like weights, not like playing around on the machines. You need to have good cardiovascular health. You need to engage in social activities. And you need to pull out the vices in your life. Like, stop masturbating. Stop playing video games so much. Like, if you can, move out of your parents' house and go and find work. It's not something that takes like a genius to figure out. It just takes discipline. It just takes discipline. It is, pray maxing. Yeah, seriously. Like, you laugh, but you get much better at prayer, and that will make you more confident because you'll be less thrown asunder by your different passions. You won't be so depressed if you pray. I can tell you this from experience. Congroiper says that Joe Pesci has been divorced 3 times. Well, yeah, you see, he attracted 3 women. He might not have been able to keep up the marriage, but my point isn't so much that, right? My point is that you will attract who you need to attract anyway. Don't worry. Okay. Do you believe in physiogamy? Yeah, to some extent. I don't think it's like definitive, but I've noticed a tendency in the way that people behave. I'm working towards the RAF fitness standard, but I know plenty of RAF guys who are still single. Yes? So? If you're going into the RAF for a girlfriend, then you're just doing the wrong thing with your life. You see, like all of this talk of like, you see what I mean, right? Like, you have all these guys who tell you not to put women on a pedestal, and then at the same time they will hate put women on a pedestal. Like, don't do it. You don't. First of all, you don't need a woman to live, and second of all, when God wants to gift you with a wife, then you'll get it. Just keep working at it. That's what the message of the stream is. Like, there's no sense in trying to mimic virtue that you don't have. You need to develop it on your own. And when you get that, you'll get the level that you need, and you'll get a wife. It'll just happen. It's not something that you control. Psychology can tell you about all of the different manifestations of a woman being attracted to you. But it won't tell you when the spark is going to hit and when some actual relationship will develop. That's impossible, because it's beyond the physical. Because human beings have souls, right? This is something that's commonly ignored by people like Rollo Tomassi. He'll completely rely on behavioristic psychology, which is in error. There needs to be an acknowledgement of the soul. And you'll get this from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, but you'll also get it from... Let me actually tell you about my master's thesis a little bit, because this is important. You'll get it from the medieval scholastics in a far more accurate way. So, for those who don't know, I'm doing a master's degree in advanced computer science, and I'm specialising in computational intelligence. And my master's thesis is probably going to be on implementing random narratives, randomly computer-generated narratives, based on the cognitive model presented by the scholastics in this particular book right here. It is called The Introduction to the Science of Mental Health by Father Chad Ripperger. I'm going to be implementing this 1,000-page book into a program and using it to generate cool stories. If you read that book and you read the scriptures and you come to an understanding of them, then you'll be far better equipped than by using behaviorism, as Rollo Tomassi argues. About Joe Pesci, Groyper, I meant that these women married him out of hypergamy. Yeah, of course. Like, is anybody surprised that women are attracted to things that are good? Like, I don't understand how this hypergamy thing is news. Like, if somebody possesses good things, then you're going to be attracted to those good things. If you don't have good things, then you're going to have less ability to attract. So what do? You gain those good things. You don't need to be like a simp. You don't need to be some player or PUA or anything. Just be virtuous. Just be a good man, and it won't matter. And I don't mean in this kind of airy-fairy, oh, I make girls happy kind of way. I mean like actually objectively good, which has been my entire point with this particular, podcast. Yeah, literally Father Chad. There's no gym for your face. I mean, come on, man. The gyms have been closed for 10 months. I used to be pretty good in the gym, and I've completely... I used to be able to run... I used to be able to do a 5k and, do pretty well on the weights, and it completely melted away. You know what you do? You rebuild yourself. Just rebuild yourself. You're a software developer. I mean, if you, I am somebody doing, like I just said, a graduate degree in computer science. I know that it is hard to develop a skill as a software developer. I started with C. If you can commit to C, then you can commit to the gym, and you can commit to following ideas that actually correspond to reality. Like, your face doesn't actually matter unless you're like Quasimodo or something, and even then, you can come up with something that will make up for that. You know, like, there's plenty of women who will marry people who are like 4'8", and you know why? Because those guys make up for it in some other way. Yeah, mewing is something that's good. There's a Mexican girl in El Paso better. Doughboys in the chat, yeah. That's a good song, El Paso. There's this girl in Mexican girl in El Paso I met in Rosa's Cantina. I simped hard for her and ended up killing a man who was flirting with her. What do? Whatever you do, don't go back to the cantina because you'll get shot. Do you think that Stoic ethics are compatible with Christianity? I think that Christian ethics are better. I will say that. I wouldn't say they're completely compatible because I seem to recall Epictetus talking about, not even being attached to your wife because it's only your turn. I mean, he didn't say this, but modern Stoics say, oh, it's only your turn, which is cringe because that's not what marriage is supposed to be anyway, right? If you're engaging in a relationship that's transient and you're calling it marriage, it's not marriage. It's also suggesting that desire in and of itself is a bad thing, which is actually killing the patient when you could be curing it, right? The problem is bad desires, not desire in itself. So, going for Christianity will not completely cut out your desire. It won't make you dependent on, it won't cut away your dependencies on everything. I mean, that's impossible, but it will recalibrate your desires such that they will be better than they once were. And when you don't get those desires fulfilled, you will have the humility to take not being fulfilled in that manner. Do you believe marriage is smart in 2020? Yes. I think it was smart when Adam and Eve were, natural law married in the garden. I think it was smart now. I don't actually care whether whether the law will hurt a guy financially. You should be prepared to sacrifice that if you're going to be involved with women in the first place. And if you lose the money, so what? What? This guy needs to be blackpilled. I went through that stage. Will a good Catholic girl fancy a soy boy? Asking for a friend. Depends what you mean by soy boy and depends what you mean by Catholic girl. Will there be Catholic girls who will go for soy boys? Of course. Will she be good? Depends on your definition of good. If she's looking for a virtuous husband, then no, because soy boys are by their nature effeminate. And by the way, effeminacy as a definition for you guys, because I know that there are some people I don't often see in the chat here. Effeminacy is when you can't put down pleasure for the sake of an arduous good. So, for example, you can't step away from the video games to go to the gym and lift weights, or you can't stop lifting weights in order to do work at work, or you're so addicted to work that you can't go back and unwind, right? Being sucked into something that you find pleasurable when you need to do something else. And the PUA tactics are an example of this, because you are so interested in women, and you are so interested in pursuing women, or, modeling your life around attracting women, that you're unable to pursue things that actually matter, like God, and like building yourself up financially, and, finding out what God wants from you here. These things actually matter. The woman thing is very secondary. Regardless of what your feelings tell you. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't desired, to be with a woman, right? That would be absurd. But you know what you do? As much as you can, you subordinate that desire to reason, and only engage in it when reason dictates. There's often people actually who watch my channel who are married, so I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few people who are married watching this. Well, things about... I've already given my example as to what I think in Stoicism isn't compatible with Christianity. Like I say, you should be attached to your wife. That's the point. You should be attached to your children. Do you believe in young earth creationism? No. This guy is trad-cucked. Okay, that's perfectly fine. I only need one woman. Don't get involved with women in the first place. No, you should be. Because they're the other half of the human race. They're great in their own way, right? Like you meet women who are bad and will do horrible things to you, and believe me, I have suffered through that. But you know, there's a beauty to them, and it's not just physical. There's a certain you see, like, I don't want to get airy fairy on the stream, but right, like, there's a beauty to women that doesn't actually relate to how they look. There's a certain softness to a lot of them that is very endearing. And I mean, like, you've read it a million times. I don't think I need to recount it. Renaissance Man is probably a high tier normie, and 6+ in looks, 6 feet tall and white. And he has no problem getting women. Well, I don't know how you can tell that from my voice. I don't know how you could call me a normie, given my channel. I don't know how you could guess. Actually, I've told you that I look like a 12-year-old. Like, I'm like a 6-foot 12-year-old. So, like, you can say, okay, I've got like genetic gifts or whatever, but that's really just an excuse, and I think you know that. Like, you could be 5'1" and Indian, and I don't know, autistic, and you could be missing a leg, and it wouldn't matter, because you know what you do? You acknowledge the things that you lack, and then you find your strengths and you work on them. Because, like, you know, when you lose something, it's usually for a reason. You might not know that, but God has got purposes based on your weaknesses. God works strongest where we are weakest. So, if you've got a weakness, so what? Just ask God to help you with it. Find out your strengths yourself and work on them. And you'll be fine. Just don't worry. Or you can be miserable and you'll be doomed. Like, there's no sense being miserable. Because when you're worrying all the time, when you're quibbling about, oh, what shall I eat next? You know, the worries of the day are sufficient in themselves. And, you know, worrying because you've got like a 2.5 face and you're like 5 foot whatever, right? Like, it's first world problems, man. Like, yeah, people have been ugly from year dot, right? People have been autistic since year dot. And you know what they did? They got on with it. Are you any different? No. So, like, suck it up and get on with it. Like, seriously. Yeah, as are men only attracted to good-looking women. Yeah, you see? Like, it works the other way as well. Oh no, they can trash your financial security. So what? Can you have any expectation from a woman who would be your wife? Well, I mean, no. I don't think so. I think that, I mean, there are certain standards, obviously, that you don't cross. Right? Like, you don't go with somebody who you know is going to be, you know, instinctually someone you can't depend on. But I was one of these people who looked at it more analytically. And to be fair, that analysis saved me in a number of cases with women, right? But I don't think it's something that you can really analyse, because it's trying to take control of a situation that, frankly, like, you'll end up ignoring many of your requirements anyway if you meet someone you like. So there's no point having that there in the first place, as long as you know, like, the real, actually really obvious red flags. Et campo ubi Troia fuit asks, probably a mainstream and cringe question, but where do I find decent women? Most of my experience have just left my heart broken, and some of them were Catholic. Yeah, yeah, that's just life though. You know, just do your normal life thing. Go to church, go to adoration, go on retreats, go and work, and you'll find someone eventually. My voice sounds 6 feet tall. Okay, whatever that means. I'm on a stream on my YouTube channel. Of course I'm going to be confident. What is your stance on sex outside of marriage? Disgusting. It shouldn't be done. It destroys any intimacy that you might have on your wedding night. And it completely... It's self-indulgent, right? You're basically using the other person to masturbate. It's a disgusting use of human being. You are reducing the other person to an instrument of your own pleasure when you fornicate. And that is unbecoming of man, because man is made in the likeness and image of God and should be loved as such. From the lowest of them to the highest. If you are honest to women. Of course. You don't lie to people, that's wrong. Now, does that mean I've never lied to a woman? Of course not. I'm a sinner. But should you? No. If you're a 5'2" Indian janitor, then it's over for you. You're completely invisible to women. Then make yourself visible. It seems that a lot of men also have had their red alarm meter broken. They choose terrible women. Can't notice the red flags and alarms. Well, you see, this is why I said, read the wisdom literature of the Old Testament and develop an idea of like scholastic psychology, right? Father Chad Ripperger has all these lectures on virtues. If you notice any of the daughters of a particular virtue in a person, right, you can get an idea whether they're good or if they have a daughter of a vice where they're weak. And then from there you can reason whether or not they're a good investment. Now some of these are obvious, like if you meet a single mother with 5 baby mamas and 6 children, then you know that she's not going to be a dependent investment, right? If she's into, you see, being into like the sexual minority thing, that's something that's fairly common nowadays, so I'm not actually sure how much of a red flag that is. Some of it's just the LARP. But if you see someone who's really committed to it, like I dated a girl who was very insistent on that, run a mile. Yeah. Yeah, like you see, George is actually right. You shouldn't let your emotions cloud your judgment too much, because you can come to the wrong conclusions on a woman. But at the same time, don't be miserable, because being miserable clouds your judgment just as much, right? They'll say, oh, being pessimistic is realism. No, it's not realism. It's being pessimistic. And a lot of the time, there isn't even a need to be pessimistic. We uglies will never stop making excuses. You just have to lay down the law and tell them that if they fail at life, they will be deselected by nature, and that will be that. I don't think that's sufficient. Because, there are some guys who just aren't meant to be married. Some of them are meant to be monks. And you know what? It's better that way. Or to be priests, There's nothing wrong with not having sex. I've never had sex. Like, there's nothing wrong with it at all. And if someone approaches you, and you don't want it, just say no. And if they're outside of marriage, just say no. And it's hard. It's harder than that, obviously. It's harder than just saying that. But it's what you're supposed to do, so do it. And if you don't have sex, so what? So what? Are you for real? It's easy when you have daddy's trust fund to back you up then, I guess. Well, actually, I've actually lived off of £13.50 or £14.50 a week, right? I've lived in accommodation that has cost me, the cheapest I've had was like $420 a month, right? And I've worked jobs in the past, right? I didn't collect my wage from that. I've worked, pretty low paying jobs, right? And I haven't received a penny from my dad. I've received it from family as well. But if you're in a position where you can have a family, you're going to be working a middle class job. And if you are working a middle class job, then if you're first of all, if you're somehow foolish enough to marry a woman who you probably married based on, sex and, how she makes you feel, right? If you are marrying based on that alone, then you're setting yourself up for trouble as it is. There needs to be discernment in marriage. Marriage is a struggle. Marriage is just as much of a struggle as ordination and as becoming a monk, right? Sometimes it's as hard as fighting the demons in the desert like St. Anthony the Great did, right? Of course, that's the purpose of marriage, to make you holier. It's supposed to be a struggle. And if you fail at that, or your wife fails at that, and you've got a middle class job, then you've got enough to eat. You've made a mistake, accept the penance. You've been given it in your hand, grasp it. Because even the worst suffering, when you grasp it, is a means to virtue. I've been locked in this room for 10 months, right? I've seen, in real life, 2 friends in 10 months. And it has caused me a lot of problems. It's been very difficult. But it's certainly given me a sense of humility. And it's the same with this, right? If you make a mistake with women, not only have you just learnt a very important lesson for the sake of younger men around you, if you don't get bitter by it, but it also gives you a reason for humility. Sometimes you need it. So just, suck it up. I don't know if you are the oldest man here, Forte. Moku asks, so I've been listening to the stream, right, and you're talking about PUA and plate spinning. Are you talking about pickup artists and circus kind of plate spinning? I've never heard these terms before. Plate spinning is a meta game concept where you keep multiple women going at once in order to increase your confidence with each woman and with additional women so that you can extract carnal pleasure from them. It's one of the more disgusting methods. Pickup, yeah, I am talking about pickup artistry though. Yeah, being pessimistic is pessimistic, literally. Which of Father Chad's books were you talking about? Okay, I'll repeat it slowly so you can get it down. Introduction to the Science of Mental Health by Father Chad Ripperger. It's a complicated book. It's a 1,000-page textbook, and it will probably take you a while to get through. But it will be worth it. Okay. Is race mixing cringe? No. It's fine. What are you talking about? Is race mixing a sin? Well, marrying outside of your race isn't a sin in itself, no. Although obviously prudence needs to be considered whenever you're marrying anyone. Like sometimes like the Montague and Capulet method isn't actually a good one. What if I don't want to compromise on any of my standards? No one here wants a used up woman. It doesn't matter how hard she's repented too much pain. No, I don't mean that, Pathias Bazinski. I mean, in practice, you'll drop it. That's what I mean. You will drop it, believe me. I know because I've done it myself. Juan says, it's very easy to believe in anything if you can find a case where it's not true. But if it may be true in certain cases, anybody knows that life's too short. You might as well try. No, there are better things to do than have fun, like develop virtue. Is self-improvement a coping mechanism? Depends what you mean by self-improvement. The self-improvement community at large does seem to be, because it's focusing on exterior problems when they should be solving internal ones, right? I think it's somewhere in the book of Psalms that says, the fool looks to the end of the earth, and the wise man looks at himself. And it's the same with a lot of these business type people, right? You can go out, you can work 20 hours a week for a year and a half and set up a business that's bringing you in a decent amount of money, right? There's a lot of good things to financial independence, right? But if you're using that as a coping mechanism to run away from your own sin, then yes, it's a problem. It's a problem of prioritizing lesser goods over greater goods. It's far better to be working in McDonald's where you have a control over your sin and you have an idea of what exactly you are spiritually. It's a lot better to be working in McDonald's and doing that than being a billionaire and with absolutely no self-awareness whatsoever. Undeniably. Good, so you know what it's like not to have financial security. Problem is, why are you willing to blow it all away for some woman? Because you love the woman. It's that simple. Of course. Love is self-sacrifice. Love is willing the good of the other, and sometimes to will the good of the other, you have to sacrifice yourself. As Christ says, God, there is no greater love than this than a man who lays down his life for his friends, as Christ did. Christ was greater than all of us because he was God, and yet he died on the cross for our sins in the most brutal way possible. He demonstrates this. We ought to do the same. He tells us, take up your cross and follow him. It's the same for us. So what if you suffer? Like, being poor, like, as much as people may find it, like, disgusting or horrible, who cares what they think? Right? If you're in the position you need to be in, then it's fine. You see, the problem, Juan Rodriguez, is that the people that believe in themselves are all in asylums. Because if you believe in yourself, you're believing in something that is fundamentally flawed. Whereas if you believe in God, who by his nature isn't flawed, because he is being, sustaining all things, then you have nothing to worry about. This is why you see a lot of people who are invested in ideologies and, frankly, impractical cults developing mental illnesses, because they're investing all their time in something that isn't perfect. If you invest in God, you don't, because you have peace. You have to struggle a lot sometimes, like fighting against temptation. That is hard, right? I mean, really hard, particularly as when you get to the higher levels of spirituality. But you will ultimately be satisfied. She will never love you, just your wallet. Okay, so what about all those women who sacrifice their lives for the sake of their children and husband? They give away hours, dozens of hours a week for the sake of their husbands. The insinuation that women are incapable of loving is one of the most disgusting things that the PUA movement insinuates, because it's false. Sure, there are women who are users. There are women who are gold diggers. There are bad women, but saying that because those exist and then tarring 4 billion people with the same brush because you've had negative experiences is just simply not correspondent to reality. It isn't a sin to race mix, but why would you want to? Hard on the children sometimes. Well, you might love the person. And I mean actually love, not like, oh, it's, oh, she's attractive. Like, oh, like, I actually love her. Like, I would die for her. Like, really mean it. I would mind being a monk, but I also want to join the army, but unfortunately there isn't a way of uniting both of these anymore. St. Maximilian Kolbe had the same problem, and he ended up being a Franciscan. You should look into him, Wrangle. Could you offer some advice, starting points, and pointers for reading the Bible? Okay, so if you want a good book to go with the Bible, in order to introduce it to you, there is a really big hardcover book, which I found profoundly useful, called A Catholic Introduction to the Bible. Volume 1, The Old Testament, by Dr. Brandt, Brant, Petrie, Pitre, and Dr. John Bergsma, that is Bergsma. You should read that. It gives an introduction to all of the Catholic books of the Old Testament. And it also provides a bunch of citations for additional reading to help you understand the scriptures even further. In terms of the New Testament, there's tons and tons of commentaries by a group of writers known as the Church Fathers. These were Christian theologians writing between the 2nd century AD and the 8th century AD. These include people like St. John Chrysostom, St. Jerome, St. Augustine of Hippo, and they've written extensive commentaries on the works of the New Testament, particularly St. John Chrysostom. These are a good start. I don't think I'll drop it. I have a special pain and trauma in my heart. I don't want to get constantly bitter with any woman. It's better to go if I go celibate. I can maintain my chastity. Yeah, but you see, the fact that you're getting trauma there shows that you care, which shows that you should be married, probably. I mean, you see, like, you've been hurt by women. I've been hurt by women in ways that I can't even describe on this stream because they're so unpleasant. But it doesn't matter. You don't tar them with the same brush and you keep soldering on. Never ever look into the occult, Keck. It will damage you mentally. What do you think about Alex Jones' conception of interdimensional beings? I believe demons exist. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know about like the clockwork elves or whatever. Is there a merit in discussing historical marriage and AGE? Never heard of AGE. I know what the Catechism says about marriage, and age, but Americans lose their composure over this. I don't know what you mean by AGE or historical marriage. Those women don't exist. No, I know for a fact they do. My mother's one. Would you get a prenup when you get married? Well, no, because that shows that I'm instinctually not confident in the decision I'm making. Have you read Otto Weininger? Yeah, I know what he said about women and other minorities that I won't mention on the stream. I'm aware of him, yeah. You see, like most of these problems would just be solved if people were just less miserable and stop believing lies. Like, they poison your lies by telling you that the woman is bad, and they poison the woman's mind by telling them that the men are bad. When in reality, you can't tar people with the same brush. Of course human beings are imperfect. Right? Like, are we surprised by this? Like, we're imperfect ourselves. Have we not looked at our own sins? And we're surprised and expect a woman to be something else? I mean, go on. Oh, she might take my money. Yeah? Bad things happen. Of course. Just, like, suck it up. Where's the best place to read up on the saints? It depends on what saint. There are hagiographies everywhere, right? One of the best ones that I would read is the hagiography on Saint Anthony of the Desert by Saint Athanasius of Alexandria. But, like, really, there are thousands about. Like, I've just looked over at my shelf and I've got one that I haven't read on St. Francis of Assisi. There's tons of them, really. The Old Testament is filled with them, actually, because it tells lives of saints. And likewise the New. The story of St. Paul's there, the story of St. Peter's there, to some extent. Oh, young marriage, minimum age. I mean, just follow the laws in your country, obviously. No, Tom, you're not getting real. You're just being pessimistic. What do you think of E. Michael Jones? I actually interviewed him on this particular topic on the channel a few months ago. Because sitting at home drinking wine in front of daytime TV is such a big sacrifice, isn't it? Yes, it actually is when you're taking care of like 3 or 4 children. You're constantly worrying about them because they're not at home with you and at school, and they might be being picked on by a kid, right? You have to cook dinner and you have to, keep everything washed. Like, believing that all of the work of a woman is simply manifest in physical things is ridiculous. Women exhaust themselves emotionally in a way that actually surprised me the first time I was really around them, because I went to a school that was all male until I was 16, and then after that it was like 95% male, and I was in social situations where I didn't really engage with many women outside of that, right? So I was very surprised at how emotional women can get. Now, you have spawned like a child out of your womb. Someone who you have brought into the world and have seen the eyes of for the very first time, who has sucked on your nipple, and you have raised and taught their first words and cooked food for them, and they're off a mile away being taught by the system. And you know for a fact that child sometimes comes home crying because they're being bullied, and there's nothing you can do about that. What do you think that does to the psychology of a woman? It's bad enough for a father when they hear that. Can you imagine what it's like for a girl? Of course it's more than just like, oh, I sit in front of the TV and drink like boxed wine. Like, if you're actually talking about a woman who's worth being with, then these sorts of things are going to play on her mind. It's exhausting. Just because a guy goes out and works 40 hours a week, perhaps typing code at a terminal, right, and has to do a horrible commute. Like, I've done horrible commutes. When I worked as a web developer, I did a 2.5 hour round commute. It was awful. Like, to say that this is, like, bad, yeah, it's hard, obviously, it's a sacrifice. But to say that the woman who is at home doing her own thing isn't suffering as well is, like, the height of selfishness. Michael Garcia says, glad to see you're doing a live stream answering questions. What was that 100-page book you recommended a minute ago? I'd like to write it down. Okay. Introduction to the Science of Mental Health. Oh, wait. What? The Catholic... I'll give you both of them. By Father Chad Ripperger. That was the first one. The second one was a Catholic introduction to the Bible. Volume 1, The Old Testament, by Dr. Brant, B-R-A-N-T, Petrie, P-I-T-R-E, and Dr. John Bergsma, that is B-E-R-G-S-M-A. Those are the two books that I've mentioned that are around 1,000 pages. Okay, let's see this. This is actually quite a lively chat. Unless you're in a virgin marriage, she will take your money. I don't think you can possibly say that for certain. I think you have been hurt by someone in your past. Oh, I see. You're talking to that. Like, yeah, everyone's been hurt by a woman or a man in the past at some point. But you know what we don't do? We don't hold on to the arrow that is in our chest. Right? And jiggle it around so it tears up our hearts even more. You know what we do? We call up a doctor and get it extracted. We heal. We call the physician of souls to heal our soul. I was always appalled in the ages of marriage in the medieval world. The husbands waited their wives to grow a little. Wasn't the age gap at the time an affront to chastity and dignity? Yeah, there's never been a time of perfection in the world, right? And getting married that young was gross. I mean, that's just one of the things that they had then. You know, we have our problems now, like murdering babies en masse. They had their problems then, like girls getting married at 12 years old. Sounds like women are just more fragile. It's the way that they're wired. They're wired differently. It's like they can't help it. Web development is overrated. Just write code in assembly. Yeah, I've written bootloaders in the past. I used to play around with interrupt hexadecimal code 15 and E for display, and for I never ever mucked around with hard drives that much. But yeah, I mean, I started with C. So I'm not like a web dev like normie. What's your opinion on arranged marriage or semi-arranged like in the 19th century? Should parents play a role in this situation? I think it might help people meet their future spouse. I think that it would be insane for the parents not to play a part. Because when you're dealing with something as important as marriage, you need as many opinions as possible. Because you're looking at the situation through rose-tinted glasses. When you look at her, she can't do any wrong, and when she looks at you, you can't do anything wrong. The trouble is that you do things wrong, and so does she. And your parents have your best interests in mind, if you've got good parents. If not, you know, the local priest or, you know, friends. They've got your best interests in mind. Of course you should run it past them. It's important to, you know, get a bearing on what's going on. What is the best way to bring people who feel unloved to God? Specifically women who are very damaged by ridicule. Literally tell them to pray. You can tell them to pray. There's also the book. There's also the book by St. Teresa of Lisieux, The Story of a Soul. I have a feeling that one will be very good for women. I don't know how effective it is, but I know from having read a lot of it that it's incredibly girly. so I think that girls would like it, but I don't know for certain. Also, how much are you considering a monastic vocation? I have been stuck in this room for 10 months. There is no way I'm becoming a monk. I wanted to tell you that blocks change usefulness will be no, it won't. No, cryptocurrencies are not worth investing in. I already addressed this on the stream on Settler's Lament the other day. I'm not going to repeat it. Let's have a look. Do you think that a revolution will occur when real men and real women will rise and create great families and great countries? Like a mass change of heart, or will it just get worse with social liberalism? It will remain the world. There will still be sin. It may not be as bad as it is now, but, you know, life will never be perfect. You just make the best of it. Like, real men and real women, whatever that is, whatever that means. Like, there isn't some sort of arbitrary distinction between good and bad people. Like, I've got my very strong weaknesses. You have, so does everyone else. You know, if they're meant, like, if you mean by that, like, people who are serious about morality, then sure, within their own families and within their own communities, they can change things. But will it make the world a paradise? No, of course not. Do you plan to restream on DLive? No. Not really. It's too much effort. I can't be bothered. What's your opinion on Neo-Stoicism and Eustace Lipsius, and other incorporation from Greco-Roman antique philosophies? I don't know much about, you know, post-Christ philosophies. I know a lot more about Plato and Aristotle. I read part of a book on the pre-Socratics, Anaxagoras, Anaximander, Thales. But in terms of, you know, post that, like, I don't know much about Theostratus, who was one of Aristotle's pupils, beyond the fact that he rejected the unmoved mover. I know a bit about Plotinus. I know a lot about the Church Fathers, but not really that much about Neo-Stoicism. And to respond to your objection, I don't see detachment as insufficiency, considering times of strife and uncertainty we are in now. I think that detachment should be pursued, but not to the insane degree that the Stoics were. Because, you know, there are good things. Thoughts on Nick Fuentes chanting "God is with us"? I mean, I guess it's good that he's chanting hymns. Like, guys, don't be so angsty. Alright? Like, you'll meet a girl eventually. If you're meant to, you will. It's just a matter of waiting. Always a matter of waiting. And frankly, it's probably a good thing that you do get to wait as well. Because there are things that need to be developed. I'm 33 now and I've never had a GF because my face is horrible and I'm short. I'm also ethnic. I actually think it's because of your lack of confidence. Who likes felt banners and clown messes? I don't mind the clown. There's actually felt banners at my church. You know, it's a nice mask because the priest there, he keeps good long silences between the prayers, so it gives you time for mental recollection. It's really a beautiful thing. And before that, I went to a guitar mass, and, you know, it was actually pretty good because it venerated God. right? It wasn't for the sake of the people there, it was for the sake of God, and that's what made it great. What do you consider to be some of the defects of Plato's system of philosophy? I found his reincarnation argument, which I heard secondhand from, I think it was Phaedro, to be ridiculous. If you wait past 30, your kids will be autistic. Okay? The Eastern Orthodox priest, Father Spiridon, has a good video on the subject of marriage and relationships. Many of you should watch it. Father Spiridon, you know, his generic videos are pretty good, but I wouldn't dig too deeply into some of his books. They're a little strange. They're not what I'd consider good bedtime reading. I've heard good things about his novels, though. I will say that. Let's have a look. What else? I got turned down for my junior prom and I got a girl to go with me. It's a senior prom and I haven't had a girlfriend since high school. Okay. Yeah, I've never had a girlfriend either. Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that I haven't had experience with women. I've had tons. Like, more than most guys on some levels. But I've never had a long-time girlfriend, because frankly, I've decided that the particular woman I was seeing at that point wasn't worth spending the time with, so I just dropped them. Yeah. That's just how it is. You know... Wouldn't call it radical, just attachment. Not up to us. If you're ugly, just become beautiful. It's your moral duty. Yeah. Become morally beautiful. If you're an obstinate sinner, then you can become beautiful by just stopping sinning. Right? Like the story of Leah in Genesis, right? The word Leah in Hebrew means cow. And she marries Jacob, known as Israel, ultimately renamed. And Jacob doesn't find her very attractive. He thinks that she's ugly and tries to get with her sister a lot, Rebecca. Eventually marries her. And she weeps to God because, you know, she doesn't feel loved, which is very understandable for the poor girl. And God answers her prayer. Why would it be any different for ugly girls or ugly guys? You've discussed /Christian before. Is there still an image board for discussing Christianity? I don't know. I was like on /Christian on 8chan, like very sparingly, when it was still going. There is nothing in your genetics stopping you from being attractive. Just be a good, literally just be a good person, and that's enough for most people. You don't have to be Brad Pitt, and why would you want to be? Right, okay, so we've been going for about... We'll go for another 5 more minutes, right? Last questions. If you've got any last questions, now's the time to post them. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Is there anything in the Discord? Nope. A lot of young people should get out the habit of constantly complaining, and everything develops into a form of sloth. Try to solve some of your issues. Yeah. Like, literally, just stop being miserable, right? I've been stuck in this room for 10 months, and I have had some miserable moments, because I'm human. But you know what you don't do? You don't let that overcome you. You don't let it destroy your faith. You don't let it destroy your relationships with other people. You don't let it destroy your hope in a better future, because there's no reason for it to. Like, chill. like, you know, there is a time for crying, there is a time for sadness, but there's also a time for happiness and laughter, right? Ecclesiastes. In fact, actually, that's something I'm going to read, because that's an important thing that people need to remember. It's not always all sunshine and rainbows, right? But it's also not always misery. Like, everyone knows that it's, like, not always sunshine and rainbows, right? But then you've got these people, like, in the chat, where you get all miserable, like, all misery guts over things. There's no need. There's no need. Just be happy. You don't have to be. You don't have to be, like, always caught in misery. To find it now. No, that's Job. This little Bible I've got right here is really annoying to flick through because I skip books really quickly. Oh, it does go straight onto the Psalms. Oh, never mind. Here we go. Ecclesiastes. Here we go. This is chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. Get behind me, saying. A time for war and a time for peace. Misery, right? It's, you know, expecting every single moment to be happiness and joy. It doesn't happen, right? But bearing the punches as they come, which is something that Ecclesiastes didn't have in a perfect form because it hadn't learnt of the cross yet. You know, that's what you have to do. What is a good initiation ceremony for young men in the West? The lack of it breeds effeminacy and puerile men. Confirmation. Can we do... Let's have a look at Ezekiel 23:20, because I have a feeling I know what that is. And thanks be to God, I almost turned to it immediately. Yeah, I figured you might mention that. That's actually a metaphor for the children of Israel pursuing other gods. So, like, people find it really funny. But it really... I mean, it's actually like them decreeing doom. So, like you know, the atheist laughs at this passage, but really they miss the particular meaning and how actually that's a decree of doom. But I mean, we don't need to pretend this. We can look at the people who tend to laugh at this and look at their lives. And I don't mean you particularly, Doctor Strange. I mean generally what I've seen, and you realise that they're living a lesser degree of that as it is. I'm not fed posting on here, Wrangle. Anyway, I'm closing up the stream. We've been going for long enough. Hope you guys found this useful, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.